افغانستان هغه هیواد دی چې له کلونو راهیسې د کړکېچ او هیلو ترمنځ اخلي. بېوزلي، اقلیمي بدلونونو اغیزې، د کاري فرصتونو کمښت او د ژوند لومړنیو خدماتو ته نه لاسرسی د افغانستان د خلکو له سترو ننګونو څخه دي. نړیوال بنسټونه په ځانګړې توګه د ملګرو ملتونو پراختیایي پروګرام تل هڅه کړې ده چې دغه ستونزو د حل لپاره ګامونه پورته کړي. خو په تیر یو کال کې د یاد بنسټ لاسته راوړنې په افغانستان کې څه وې او د دغو ستونزو د کموالي لپاره کوم پروګرامونه د دې ادارې له لورې پلي شوي دي؟ سلامونه او درنښت. د یک تلویزیون دې ځانګړې مرکې ته مو ښه راغلاست وایم. زه سنګر هاشمي یم او په دې خپرونه کې زما میلمه په افغانستان کې د ملګرو ملتونو د پراختیایي پروګرام استازی ښاغلی سټیفن رودریګز دی. Dear Mr. Rodriguez, thank you for being with us. Let's begin with the very first question. What are the main challenges facing the development of Afghanistan today?
So there are a number of challenges that the country faces. One, of course, is just the high rate of poverty and unemployment in the country. And you see it. You go to the different provinces, you see a high level of people being unemployed, not having jobs. And the economy has been contracting over the last many years. And so the economy hasn't grown adequately to create jobs for people. But on top of that, you also have the climate challenges in Afghanistan. You know it more than I do. The floods, the earthquakes, the droughts. And that's causing significant impact on the lives of millions of people. Droughts, for example, last year affected maybe 19 provinces. So the livelihoods of millions of farmers were impacted. But you also have more than 5 million Afghans who have been returned from neighboring countries. And this is putting an enormous burden, enormous strain on the social services of the country, on housing, on access to basic services like water. But it's also putting a pressure on the job market because there isn't enough job locally. And you have more Afghans coming looking for jobs as well. Then you have international aid, which has been declining significantly over the last few years. I think we have seen $1 billion cut in aid. So when you put all of these things together, plus the natural disasters like the earthquake that we had in the East recently, it's a major challenge for the economy to deal with. But let me also say that there are some things that are happening well at the same time. In the last 2 years, the economy has started to stabilize and to grow. We're seeing trade beginning to increase. We're seeing the government beginning to collect more revenues, which means that they can invest more in public services to people. We've seen a reduction in corruption. We've seen peace and stability, which is extremely important for the country to develop and grow. So there are challenges, but there are also some things that are moving in the right direction.
Great, thank you. To follow on from that, what are the main focus areas of UNDP's programs in Afghanistan and what are its priorities?
So we're trying to address exactly those challenges that I described. When it comes to poverty and unemployment, our major focus is to support the private sector to grow, the economy to grow, and to create jobs for people. So that's a major focus of our program. We're supporting the banking sector, the microfinance institutions so that they can lend to the private sector, so businesses can get access to capital and can expand their business. They can buy more equipment, they can hire more people. Over the last few years, we've supported 90,000 plus businesses. Small, medium, but also larger size businesses as well. So that's a major focus for us, job creation and economic growth. The second is for people to have access to critical infrastructure and services like water, like irrigation, like access to proper healthcare and educational facilities, bridges, roads, those basic infrastructure. And I would say, again, over the last few years, more than 6.4 million people have benefited from the infrastructure that UNDP has invested in, including energy, renewable energy. More than 4.8 million Afghans have benefited from renewable energy programs that UNDP has invested in. The third area, and I mentioned before, the climate issues.
Yeah.
But how do we protect communities? How do we protect households from climatic shocks? We're building flood protection systems, flood protection walls, for example, that protect thousands of communities across Afghanistan. We build dams and check dams so that we can better manage water. And so communities that were having drought can have better access to water. So these are some of the major areas of focus for us. It's jobs, it's economic development, it's access to basic services, and it's also protecting communities against disasters.
Thank you. Would you please tell us more about this, that if you please specify the criteria, as you have mentioned about the banking sector, that you are helping with those for job creation opportunities as well. What type of criteria they have to meet that then you will be helping them?
So currently we're open to working with all banks that meet the requirements of the Central Bank of Afghanistan, the DAB. So once these institutions are properly registered and meet the requirements to operate in the country, then they're eligible to participate in our programs. So two things that we're doing in this area. One, we're providing what we call a credit guarantee. So banks are reluctant to provide loans to small businesses because of the higher risk. When we provide a guarantee, we reduce the risk for the banks to lend. And so we have a guarantee program currently, and a number of banks are participating in that, like First Microfinancial, Gazanfar, and others. Yeah. So they get coverage and they provide loans. But we also provide capital to some of these institutions so that they can use that capital again to lend to businesses across the country. So those are the two major things that we're doing, and it's open to all banks and microfinance institutions. The challenge we have currently is that we have new microfinance institutions that have not yet demonstrated that they have the systems, the risk management systems, etc., to operate. And so we're looking to strengthen their capacity, to build up their capacity so that they can operate properly and meet our requirements.
Okay, thank you. So going for another question, Afghanistan is still primarily an agriculture economy. How does UNDP support farmers and rural communities in general?
Indeed, so you're right. I mean, maybe 70% of the employed population in Afghanistan is employed in the agricultural sector.
Yeah.
So it's massively important for the lives of people across the country. Now, there are a number of challenges. When you go to the communities and you meet with the farmers, they will tell you that water is a major issue. And so one of the main things that we do is ensure access to water. So you'll go to provinces like Helmand, which is very dry. You see that we've built dams and check dams, but we've also built irrigation systems all over Afghanistan to channel water into the farms that, so that farmers can have access to water for their production. But we also provide, and this is not just UNDP, because there are also agencies like FAO who work with farmers, and WFP, the World Food Programme. But from our end, we're helping things like cold storage facilities, with greenhouses, with better crops that can produce more income. Mm-hmm. So many farmers, they're producing wheat or they're producing low-value crops. When we help them to produce orchard crops like apples and apricots and so on, they can earn a higher income. So we provide that as well. And finally, we help them to process some of what they produce. So to do agro-processing. There's a lady who runs a factory in in Herat. She buys tomatoes from about 100 farmers, and she makes tomato paste and produces that and sells it to the market. So that's processing and enhancing the value of the agricultural crops.
Okay, great. I have watched some of UNDP's activities and videos where I have saw that they're also donating for, like they're giving a sewing machine to the ladies, and then they are hiring some stuff to make up job opportunity for themselves. But it was only for the those provinces that they are touching with the borders. Why this is only for that specific provinces? Why it's not for all the provinces?
Well, to be honest, we do support women-led businesses in all the provinces in which we work. Sometimes we're a little constrained because our donors have priorities in terms of areas in which they want to work, and we listen to our donors. We also discuss with the authorities, and we come to a sort of understanding in terms of where we can prioritize. But in terms of our overall program in the country, I would say we're investing in almost all 34 provinces, and wherever we invest, we also invest in businesses led by women. In the last few years, we supported close to 78,000 medium, small micro-enterprises run by women in every province. And I've been out there, I've seen a lot of these businesses, I've met with a lot of these women. Some of them, I remember one lady in Herat who was producing yogurt. Many are producing carpet, some are doing tailoring. There's a lady in Mazar who's doing biscuit manufacturing.
Good.
So there are many different types of businesses that we support, and it's all over the country.
Okay, thank you. قدرمن لیدونکو یو لنډه دمه لرو بیرته راګرځو. قدرمن لیدونکو د خبرونې دوام ته ښه راغلاست. Mr. Rodriguez, so in the past year we have seen a big influx of returnees from neighboring countries, as well as internally displaced people. What is the UNDP and the UN more broadly doing about that?
I'm happy you've raised this question, because within the UN we see this as one of the major challenges facing Afghanistan today. Afghanistan has a population of about 40 million, estimates vary. So when you have, in 1 year alone, like 2025, 2.3 million Afghans coming back to the country, and since 2023, more than 4.5, close to 5 million Afghans forced back into the country. That's more than 10% of the population.
Yeah.
No country in the world can deal with that influx of people reasonably well, and worse, an economy which is as weak as Afghanistan is. So we're coordinating very closely with the authorities, but we're working with our international partners, our donors, and we have a few joint programs within the UN, and these programs are led by UNDP. So you have agencies, of course, that do the humanitarian assistance to the returnees at the border, like IOM and the Refugee Agency, UNHCR. But the element that deals with how to reintegrate Afghans into their society, that's where UNDP takes the lead. So we're supporting a few things. One, construction of houses for the returnees. In some places we hear that housing prices have gone up by more than 300% because of the high number of people coming in. So there's a desperate need to get more houses. We're supporting them with jobs. And if you go to the east, you'll see some of the businesses we support. And when we support these businesses, we ask them to hire returnees as well. We're supporting them with having access to water. We're supporting them with energy. And this is a joint initiative that combines UNDP, IOM, the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, but agencies like Habitat that deal with housing, ILO that deals with jobs. So it's a joint UN program that's trying to help returnees to reintegrate in society, but have jobs that can ensure that they can take care of themselves and their families.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I know many returnees that they came from Pakistan, especially from Pakistan. Most of the returnees from Pakistan and Iran, they are coming to 5 major provinces because the job opportunities are comparatively better than other provinces. So most of them are coming to Kabul. I know those people, they are still unemployed, even they don't have a house for themselves. They are looking for a small amount of money to make a house for rent. So it means that they are struggling, really they are struggling.
Yes.
Also, those people are under your consideration, those who are living in Kabul.
Yes, no. Every returnee
Yeah.
is under our consideration. And again, not just UNDP, but the UN. Now, you've hit on a very important issue, which is the resources available to meet the needs of the returnees is very, very small compared to the needs that are there. And it's both from the influx in terms of providing them with support at the border and then helping them to reintegrate into the society. I met, for example, recently with the Minister of Returnees and Refugees, and we discussed this issue. And we acknowledge that the government itself is also playing an important role. When the returnees come in, the government does provide some financial assistance, does provide some temporary shelter, and so on. But the minister also acknowledged that the resources are simply not there to meet the overwhelming needs. And this is one of the reasons we're encouraging the neighboring countries to ensure that the return is gradual and it's dignified, because again, no country in the world can manage that massive influx of people at the same time. So we've put out an appeal to the international community for funding, but we haven't received nearly, not even half of what we've requested to support the returnees. So there is a challenge there. We can't meet the needs of all.
International assistance to Afghanistan has fallen significantly in recent years. Who are the main donors of UNDP in the country, and has the cut in US assistance affected your programs?
Yes. So the cut in assistance overall, as I mentioned earlier, has been quite severe. And when you have an economy which is not growing fast, let us say last year, based on the NISA's data, the economy would have grown about 1.9%. The population is growing faster than that. In addition to that, we estimate that the economy needs to be growing at about 6 to 8% to create enough jobs. So when aid has declined by more than $1 billion, it makes it even more difficult for the Afghan people. So the cut in funding from the US, yes, I think we're all aware. And what I would say on that is the US has provided billions of dollars of support to Afghanistan over many, many years, over decades. And they've been an important partner for us in the UN. And so the cut does hurt, not just UNDP, but the majority of UN agencies. And we hope there'll be a time when the US will reconsider that position and we can return to having a partnership with the US. For now, our major partners are the European Union, the Japan, the Republic of Korea, and we have a trust fund, a UN trust fund, that many of the European donors in particular contribute to, Sweden, Denmark, Netherlands, and so on. So those are our major sources of funding currently. But again, as I said, you can see there's been a steep decline in funding for the UN, and that has impacted our ability to provide support to the poorest and most needy people in Afghanistan.
How can Afghanistan transition from aid dependency to a more self-sustaining economic model?
That's a brilliant question. And that's a message that we, as UNDP, we're a development agency. And so our focus is not on the short term, it's on the long term. Now, already, I must say that the international assistance which is coming is beginning to shift. Initially, almost 80% of that international assistance was for humanitarian aid. Now it's almost 50-50 between humanitarian assistance and development, or what they call basic needs assistance. And that's an important change, because we do need to invest more in the kinds of things that will generate sustainable development for Afghanistan. But the other part of it is that the local private sector has to play a critical role. Development is not going to take place because of international aid. And the state, the government, doesn't have enough resources to create jobs and generate economic growth. That must come from the private sector. And so within the UN, we have been putting major focus on promoting private sector development. I have been promoting it, the World Bank and others, to the international community, to the de facto authorities. But that's where we're trying to concentrate our effort, because the jobs that need to be created, the growth that needs to happen must come through the private sector. That's a pathway to sustainable development for Afghanistan.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. قدرمن لیدونکو یو لنډه دمه لرو بیرته راګرځو. د خبرونې دوام ته ښه راغلاست. So, energy is a big issue in Afghanistan. Could you explain to our viewers about Afghanistan's energy shortfall and how this is being addressed, as well as the potential for energy in the future?
So, energy is absolutely vital for any country. It's important for households, for houses. It's important for the private sector. For businesses to mechanize, to industrialize, they need energy. And so this is vitally important. Now, there's a major energy deficit, a major energy gap in Afghanistan. I'll give you an example. Households in Afghanistan, just households alone, they need about 5 gigawatts of energy every year.
Okay.
But currently, the economy is only producing 0.7 gigawatts. Businesses need about 10 gigawatts. So we're nowhere near producing the level of energy that's needed to power economic growth and to help households to emerge out of poverty. So there are a number of things that need to happen. Some of it is happening. I think we've seen the government sign agreements with some of the neighboring countries to provide energy. We've seen like the World Bank resume its CASA 1000 project to get energy across Afghanistan as well. So some of that is beginning to happen. It will take time because these projects are long-term investments, and so you may take 5-10 years for some of these things to happen. For us in UNDP, we're looking at 2 major areas currently. One, we're providing renewable energy to hundreds of hospitals, of clinics, of schools across Afghanistan. Okay. Hundreds. And that's to ensure that if you go to a clinic, that they have energy, that they have electricity. You look at a newborn baby that needs incubation. Without energy, you can't have that. Some surgeries that need to be performed at hospitals, you need reliable energy, not just energy for 1 hour of the day, but energy throughout the day, throughout the evening. So we're doing that, but we're also supplying energy to hundreds upon hundreds of businesses, especially small businesses. And you can go to some of these provinces, you go to Kandahar, you see businesses that have benefited from the renewable energy we provide. But where we want to go with this though, the energy needs can't be dependent on UNDP, you can't be dependent on the World Bank. It has to come through investments from the private sector, and especially the international private sector. So both local and international. We have started a program with the banks here. We're working closely with AIB, with المللی, with Gazanfar. And again, we're trying to do the same thing, to provide a guarantee so that they will lend for businesses that are investing in energy in Afghanistan. So that's a major initiative that we're focusing on, because we need a sustainable solution that's not dependent on our aid, that's not dependent on loans from the World Bank or anybody. So that's where we're pushing, to get the banking sector to invest in energy projects in Afghanistan. And we're also trying to work with the government to encourage foreign direct investment as well in the energy sector. So last year in July, we had a major energy conference, and we had investors from across the region. We had the de facto authorities, we had the local private sector, many of these actors together, looking at what are the impediments, what are the barriers to invest in energy in Afghanistan.
What is UNDP's level of cooperation with the current government of Afghanistan, and at what level?
So The UN engages, so again, UNDP is here, we're part of the UN family. The UN engages with the government at all levels. And you have heard of the Doha process.
Yes.
So this is an international process that brings the de facto authorities at very senior level together with very senior UN officials, with the member states, the various governments from the region, from internationally and so on. And we have dialogue around issues that matter to the de facto authorities and the issues of concern to the international community. And so there's that ongoing process. And so there's an annual sort of meeting, but there are working group meetings as well. And we participate, UNDP, in 2 of those working groups that involve the de facto authorities. But on a day-to-day basis, in terms of our programs, the de facto authorities, they're the government of the country. And so they play a very important role. It's impossible for us to operate without engaging with the authorities. They are aware of the key priorities in the country. They know the country far better than any external actor would know the country. So at a technical level, we coordinate with the de facto authorities. We exchange information. We listen to their priorities. We benefit from some of the technical knowledge and ideas that they have. And we use that to help in the design of our programs and the implementation of our programs. We do not provide any funding to the authorities. And to be honest, they do not request it from us. I think they are aware of the limitations. And when we implement our programs, we have very rigorous risk management systems to ensure that the programs benefit the communities, benefit the individuals and the households, and not the de facto authorities. But we do coordinate, we do share information, and I do meet with the ministers, I do meet with the governors, and my technical team, they have ongoing discussions with the technical people within the ministries and agencies as well.
What long-term risks worry you most about Afghanistan development trajectory?
So there are a number of risks. One is that the economy will not grow fast enough. And if that doesn't happen, it means you're going to have higher and higher levels of poverty and unemployment, and that's not a good thing. Especially when you have youth unemployment. We've seen it all over the world. When you have millions of young people having nothing to do, they either look to migrate or they turn to criminal activities. They may join terrorist organizations and so on. So there's an urgent need to create opportunities for young people and to create enough jobs within the country. And so that's one of the major risks, that the economy doesn't grow fast enough. Of course, there's always the risk of further instability. We see those tensions with the neighboring countries, especially with Pakistan. And we as a UN, we are encouraging that dialogue, that negotiation. Some of the member states like Turkey, like Iran, have hosted some of the talks. But that's important for Afghanistan to remain stable, to remain peaceful, because without that, no development can take place. I think the third thing is, if the restrictions remain on women and girls, there's a risk that Afghanistan will not be accepted within the international community as one of the member states. And I know this is something that's important to the Islamic Emirate. They want to be regarded as a normal member of the international community with access to all the usual things, you know, support from the IMF, from the World Bank, from whatever the case may be. But for as long as those restrictions remain, it would be extremely difficult for Afghanistan to normalize its relationship within the international community. And I think the fourth thing is just the climatic shocks. Afghanistan is the 6th country in the world most affected by climate shocks, the 6th. So every year we see hundreds of millions of dollars of damage, of losses due to climate. And so when you put those four things together, those for me would be the four major risks that I see. The economy not growing, creating jobs for young people especially, the risk to further instability, the climate shocks, and of course the Afghan not being accepted within the international community, because that acceptance comes with a lot of benefits as well. You know, I'll give you one very small example. When I talk to some of the businesses in the US and elsewhere and ask them, why do you not invest in Afghanistan? They say, well, there are human rights issues or there are issues with women's rights and so on. So they don't want their brand to be tarnished by making those kinds of investments. So to attract large foreign investment, these issues also need to be resolved. And I just want to make one small comment here. We're aware that this is Afghanistan. It has its own history, its own culture. And so I think what we're looking for from the UN is culturally appropriate ways of ensuring that women and girls are able to go to school, to have an education and so on within the culture and respectful of the cultural context of Afghanistan. But those restrictions ultimately should be removed.
Are you optimistic about the future of Afghanistan? Say the next 5 years or 10 years. What do you think the key things that have to happen to ensure better lives for the people of the country?
So I am optimistic. You have to be optimistic if you work for an agency like UNDP, because we're in the business of helping people to have better lives. But I'm also optimistic because I've spent almost 3 years in Afghanistan. I've been in many of the communities. I've sat on the ground with community elders, with men, with women. I've seen something in the Afghan people. It's resilient, it is strong, there's dignity, and people want to work, people want to achieve. Mm-hmm. And I've also seen that entrepreneurial spirit. If you support one small business, you give a business $5,000 and you see how much they grow. It's remarkable. So the Afghan people, I think, will succeed. Mm. You know, with or without us, they will succeed. We're here to help, of course. We're here to help. I think a couple of things would help. One is, of course, to remove the restrictions that I mentioned on women and girls. And part of it is just for an economic reason. When you restrict women from working, it costs the economy. And our estimate in UNDP is that over the last 2 or 3 years, it would have cost the economy close to $1 billion. Mm. And it's a small economy, so you don't want to afford that kind of cost to the economy. But as I said, that will also stimulate more investment in the country and open up more opportunities for the international financial institutions, for the international investors, and so on. So that is one of the pathways to greater economic growth. The other is stability, continued peace and stability, and especially the issues with the regional neighbor. I think if we can resolve those issues going forward, that will also help a lot. And the rest is just for the government and people of the country, with the private sector, with the NGOs, everybody to come together to rebuild this blessed country, because it is possible. And I have a lot of faith that it will happen. But those little things can help to make a huge difference.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, for being with us. It was really nice talking to you.
Thank you. So much. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
قدرمن لیدونکو دا زموږ د نن ورځ ځانګړې خپرونه تر بیا ښې چارې.